Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me on what is an extraordinary episode here on the Wine Access Experience on Facebook, because we are actually being joined from Bordeaux by none other than Jean-Guillaume Prats, CEO of Domaine Baron de Rothschild. It's morning here, evening for Monsieur Prats. I'm actually going to be having the 2010 Chateau Lafite-Rothschild for breakfast. So thank you for giving me this this wonderful excuse, and so lovely to see you again. So for anyone at home, if you have any questions, please type them in the chat box. I will pose them to Monsieur Prats, as many as we can get to in the next 30 minutes or so. My name is Vanessa Conlin. I'm the head of wine for Wine Access and a master of wine. And I rarely give a formal introduction to my guests here on the Wine Access Experience, but I feel that this is a pretty extraordinary occasion. So if you don't mind, I would like to just give a brief introduction to our guest. Jean-Guillaume Prats is a Bordeaux native whose studies at the European Business School took him to Paris, London, and Madrid. After a brief stint in the world of banking, he returned to Bordeaux in 1994. In 1998, he was appointed CEO of Chateau Duhart-Milon, his family's property and a second growth. In 2013, he left to lead the wine division of luxury house LVMH, including Dom Pérignon, Krug Champagne, Chateau Cheval Blanc, and Chateau d'Yquem. In 2018, he was selected as CEO of Domaine Baron de Rothschild, where he oversees properties in Bordeaux, Sauternes, China, Chile, Argentina, and the Languedoc. The crown jewel, of course, of the portfolio is Chateau Lafite-Rothschild, one of the most famous wines in the world, and one that I am very, very fortunate to have in my glass. So welcome to you. Thank you so much for being here. And how is everything in Bordeaux today?
We are very lucky to have an extraordinary weather, and I was telling you early on that you should normally not believe a Frenchman when he tells you that the weather is fantastic, but we are likely to produce again the vintage of the century, even though 10% of the work has been done, but the water reserve in the soil and the beautiful weather over the last 10 days at flowering time, as it is today on the Merlot, the Semillon and the Sauvignon is looking great. So far, everything is under control, but we have the same worries that everyone has around the world. And the last 2 months, like for everyone producing fine wines on the planet, have been dedicated to taking care of our vineyards.
Wonderful. So I have a question for you about just Bordeaux in general. So, after centuries of being one of the most prestigious wine growing regions in the world, how, in your opinion, has it been that Bordeaux has been able to maintain its quality and reputation?
I use the word very often resilience, that capacity to go through very difficult times with the same commitment, with a very long-term view. Bordeaux has gone through the crisis of the end of the 19th century, the First World War, the economical crisis of 29, the Second World Wars, the phylloxera much before that, and then all the crises we had in the 70s and 80s, and we have one today. That sense of resilience, that stand of long-term commitment, and families and ownerships coming from abroad, reinvesting new blood, new ideas, and of course new money into Bordeaux has probably made Bordeaux what it is today for the last 250 years, which is a very long-term view. So the crisis we are facing today is one more among many others.
For those at home, I think I mentioned this, but I should actually show the bottles. It's the 2010 Chateau Lafite-Rothschild that I'm enjoying. And Monsieur Prats, what is your opinion on the 2010 vintage?
I'm sorry, I've lost you on 2010 vintage.
What was your opinion on the 2010 vintage in Bordeaux? It's the vintage that I have in my glass. Am I drinking this at the right time? Did I open it too soon? Have I waited too long? What's your opinion on the 2010?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I've lost you. I'm lost you on your question on 10, I guess. I'm sorry for that. I had connection issue.
Oh, it's no problem at all, Monsieur. I was simply asking your opinion on the 2010 vintage that I am enjoying in my glass right now. on was it the right time to open it? Did I open this too soon? Should I have?
First, Vanessa, you are totally spoiled.
Yeah.
And you are committing a crime, which is to open a vintage of Lafite, which is not only extraordinary but far too young to drink. Lafite is one of these wines which age forever. It's probably the only machine to go back in time that works. And 2010 is clearly into that line. It's a wine that has big shoulders, very round and rich tannins, but some beautiful freshness. It probably took 5 years for it to come around just now, but it's far too early. It's one of the great vintage produced over the last 50 years in the line of most likely the 82s, the 86, the 2000, 2010, and maybe 18 and 19. And 16 could be as well.
I've tasted some of the 16s and they're extraordinary. Very exciting vintage. So I actually have a question about one of the other properties, about Duhart-Milon. So I'm wondering, what is it, for those who aren't familiar, what do you wish that everybody knew about that property?
It's a property that has suffered, to be very unfortunately, in the shadow of Chateau Lafite. It was bought by Baron Elie of Rothschild in 1962. It's been always managed side by side with its big brother Lafite. The vineyard is actually adjacent. It's located in the northern part of Pauillac, just between Mouton, Lafite, Pontet-Canet, and Duhart-Milon. All these four vineyards are in the same neighboring. And Duhart needed to have its own identity, which has been done over recent years. We are actually now reinvesting heavily into the winemaking facility after having done all the work in the vineyard. So Duhart is a property which has the blood, the signature of what we do, without, of course, having the extraordinary history and aging potential of Chateau Lafite. It's one thing which is very different in terms of style of wine. It's a much cooler climate. The terroir of Duhart are in the very western part of the Pauillac appellation. And global warming over the last 20 years has tremendously helped the Cabernet Sauvignon to get the perfect phenolic ripeness. And in warm years, Duhart has that kind of freshness and balance and harmony that is the perfect definition of modern Bordeaux.
So you actually brought up a topic that I wanted to ask you about anyway, which was climate change. So I'm curious, how have your teams changed any of their farming practices, if they have, to adapt to climate change?
Well, I first will answer by giving you a little story. When I joined Bordeaux in 1986, when I joined Sauternes, when the harvester, we used to have Spanish harvesters. When this harvester used to arrive in mid-September, they were giving a set of plastic books and raincoat because it was going to rain during harvest time. It was a standard procedure. And then when I left in 2011, we gave them T-shirts and sun hats. So clearly, over the last 25 years, Bordeaux, like everywhere around the world, has experienced global warming, which for us, I have to confess, has been very positive. There is no more disease at vineyards at harvest time. We used to say that it's quite easy to know when you should harvest the Cabernet Sauvignon. It's when you see botrytis in the vineyard, it means you can no longer wait. And today, we have beautiful weather conditions. There is even some drought. So the consequences of that, to answer your question in details, is less green harvesting, much better canopy and lease management, pushing the date of harvest in anticipation quite sooner, probably also trying to keep yields fairly important, not having the vineyards also to expose, so having some grass to create a little bit of evapotranspiration. So many techniques, as well as in winemaking, less violent methods of extractions and macerations, and trying to make sure that since we have more ripeness, slightly more sugar content, there is less need of extraction and pumping overs in the winemaking methods, so we can protect the integrity of the fruit and the freshness of our wines. But as a conclusion, global warming has been positive in Bordeaux, I have to confess.
Thank you for the detailed answer. I have a question about another property, which is L'Evangile. So it sits literally between Petrus and Cheval Blanc, two of the highest regarded properties on the right bank. So what would you say are the differences among those three properties?
Well, first, l'Évangile, Cheval Blanc and Petrus sit on the side of l'Évangile, not the other way around. We should make it clear for everyone. Cheval Blanc has a very high proportion of Cabernet Franc. It's of course Saint-Émilion, and it produces wines which have an extraordinary black pepper, green pepper, almost Indian curry nose. The Cabernet Sauvignon is extremely spicy, and it's a wine that aged fantastic. There are numerous great vintage of Cheval Blanc, and it's a fairly large property as well, of about 60 plus acres. Petrus, which is our immediate neighbor, literally the vineyards are literally adjacent, has this extraordinary blue clay that you find on the Plateau de Pomerol. You have four estates which are all together, which are Vieux Château Sauternes, La Conseillante, Petrus, and l'Évangile. And Petrus has the highest proportion of blue clay, which produces wines which have almost a silk, a cotton aspect. L'Évangile has also some of this blue clay, but it also has other soils which are a lighter style of gravels that you find in Pomerol, and therefore it produces wine which have also aging potential, more in the line of Cheval Blanc. It produces wines which are probably less exotic than the wines of Petrus, probably more Medoc to a certain extent, and wines which have over the recent years a beautiful freshness. So I could only say, to draw a conclusion, that l'Évangile is the perfect balance between Cheval Blanc and Petrus.
Perfectly spoken. So I actually have a question from someone who is watching at home. Noah would like to know, he says, I have a bottle of Duhart-Milon 2010. When would it not be a crime to open that bottle?
If you give it, Noah, another 5 years, it will be very appropriate. What I would suggest is to open a bottle every 6 months so you can see the wines going through and see the evolution. But there's no doubt that Duhart-Milon will be ready to drink sooner than Chateau Lafite or even Caruade, which are the three great wines we produce in Pauillac. It's a beautiful wine, which is very charming, extremely selective, without having the aging potential, the length and the density that you'll find in Caruade or Lafite.
Thank you for that. I have a question about yet another property, which is Rieussec. So, which was acquired, I believe, in 1984. So I'm curious, what was attractive about adding a Sauternes property to the portfolio?
The sweet wines of Bordeaux, the wines produced from Vendange Tardive, Botrytis cinerea, that you find in Sauternes, in Barsac, were the most extraordinary wines of Bordeaux in the 1800s. In 1855, when Emperor Napoleon III made the classification of Bordeaux, he came as the number one wines of Bordeaux, just above Chateau Lafite. So the wines of Sauternes always had this extraordinary mystique and fame, and they are one of the most precious wines to produce. They're extremely difficult. They are very much depending on Mother Nature and the Mother Nature that you have over the last 10 days before your harvest. So you can have extraordinary weather conditions, and then things goes wrong over the last 10 days, 2 weeks, you can lose everything. So they are very precious. So Baron Eric de Rothschild wanted to be part of that story of being part of the DNA of Bordeaux, and when the option to acquire Rieussec was possible in the early 80s, he made that move. So today it's a very different ball game. These wines are still extraordinary, but they are suffering, and they find it difficult to find their place in the heart and cellars of wine lovers around the world. It's true for Sauternes, but it's also true for the great one from Tokai. It's true from the great one from the Rheingau, the Wachau in Germany, and many other places around the world. So it is our duty and our job to re-explain to the world and to the wine lovers and consumers the extraordinary craftsmanship, attention to details, and dream that goes behind these wines. And Rieux-Sec is, as Évangile is next to Cheval Blanc and Petrus, Rieux-Sec is next to Chateau Yquem, right adjacent, slightly different again. Yquem is one of the most extraordinary wines in the world, with no doubt. And Rieux-Sec has part of its terroir, which is quite similar. So we produce wine with the same length and aging potential than those of Yquem. Of course, it hasn't got the story of Yquem, which is dating from the 1400s. But we're very proud of what we're doing, and we are going into biofarming in Rieux-Sec, which, as you can well imagine, is a challenge when you go into Brotitis wines.
How many other properties, if you know, in Sauternes are actually practicing or moving towards practicing biodynamic?
I would say that almost most of the most famous ones, I mean, Yquem, I know, is going into that direction. Guiraud has been established for some time. Clémence has been established for some time. I'm not exactly sure where Laforie-Péraguet, Cigalas-Rabault, and Suidereau would stand, but I have no doubts they are going into the same direction. It's a common direction that everyone is taking in Bordeaux, which certainly makes sense after the great producers of Burgundy have done. And we do the same in Pauillac. L'Évangile is already a fully registered bio in biofarming, in bio-viticulture. So we're following that trend.
I see. Well, and your answer about Sauternes actually answered what was going to be my follow-up question, which was, sort of what are the opportunities for sweet wines? As you know, it's a challenge, at least in the U.S. market. I can speak to that personally. So I'm curious, sort of, then what would you recommend in terms of serving or pairing or opportunities to enjoy this? And I will say that I had the distinct pleasure and honor of speaking with Saskia with some of our clients last year, and her pairing was with oysters. So what would your talk be?
She's entirely right. Oysters with pepper, because you balance the saltiness of the oysters and the power of the pepper with the sweetness, but also the acidity, which is very important in Rieux-Sec. It goes extremely well with roasted chicken and potatoes, or roasted duck, but only with a young Rieux-Sec, a young Sauternes. It goes very well with seafood, with lobsters, with shrimps. It goes very well with cheese, blue cheese, white cheese. It goes extraordinarily well as an aperitif, simple as like this, as a fresh glass. What you should not do is to have it with chocolate, with dessert. You probably want to skip foie gras, which makes everything a little bit too heavy. And the beauty with a great bottle of Sauternes and Rieux-Sec is you can leave it open in the fridge for 3 weeks and continue to drink it. So my advice, and this is what we do here at home and what we do at Chateau Lafite when we serve it as an aperitif. Everyone who comes and joins us for lunch or dinner in our properties in Bordeaux is been welcomed by either a glass of Rieux-Sec or Carme de Rieux-Sec or a glass of champagne.
So when I was fortunate enough to actually have lunch with you in Bordeaux, I look forward to hopefully having that opportunity again. You are very excited about the project in China, which I think you have since named Domaine de Langdai, if I pronounced that at all correctly. So I'm curious how that project, how has it progressed, and have there been any sort of unexpected challenges with founding the winery in China?
Maybe I should give a little back.
We might have lost Monsieur Prats. We will give a moment. Oh, I believe he's back. Monsieur, I believe I can hear you again. Are you able to hear me? Monsieur Prats, are you still there? Oh, I think you're back.
Yes, I'm here. I'm back. I'm sorry. I'm working on the connection. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
I can hear you. Yes.
No, I was simply saying that China has yet to discover where great wine can be produced. It's a very vast country which had a wine production in the 1800s and the early part of this century, but everything was totally destroyed by the Cultural Revolution in the 50s and 60s. So it's only recently, over the last 20 years, 15, 20 years, that people have started to recreate vineyards in China. The first vineyards were created in the early 90s. So there is no sense of understanding, there is no sense of track records. And as you know, in order to produce a good wine, you need to make a lot of mistakes to understand what you should not do and what doesn't work. So that's where China is all about. So we don't have the pretension to say that we produce the best wine in China or we are in the best place. We're simply trying to figure out, like everyone else, what to do. There are 4 major places where wine has been produced in China. One is in Ningxia, which is about 2 hours west of Beijing by flight, in the Yellow River Desert. There's Hebei, which is just behind the Chinese wall, just outside of Beijing. There is the Shandong province where we are, which the place is called Yantai, Penglai. It's literally 1 hour from Pyongyang in North Korea, across the Chinese Sea. So it's opposite to the Korean peninsula. And there is another place where in my previous life I've launched a great wine as well, which is in the Himalayas in Shangri-La, in the Yunnan province. So we started this project called Longdai in Shandong with a white piece of paper 12 years ago now. It was a great entrepreneurial spirit from the Rothschild family to start with nothing. So we planted the vineyards, we created the terrace, we trained the team, we built all the lands and landscapes, and then we built the winemaking facilities. And when I joined Chateau-Duhart-Milon 2 years ago, the project was already well in full speed and in advance. So I had the privilege to look with the team, of course, of the launch of our first wine, which was the 2017 Longdai, which was done last year, and then we are going to release the 18 soon. What I just would like to say as a conclusion on China is that every country in the world, which is a country where fine wine is being consumed, is always a country where fine wine is being produced as well. There are some very rare exceptions. One is in Hong Kong, and maybe the other one is in the United Kingdom. But you could claim that our British friends used to own the port industry, the sherry industry, and the border wine industry. So they have a strong culture, and now they're producing vineyard in Kent and Surrey. So China, which is a country where fine wine is being consumed, must be a country where fine wine will be produced. It will take a long time, but it will get there. And so that's an extraordinary project. And it's quite fascinating for us to run this project from start, when we have in our hands something unique such as Chateau Lafite, to start again in China.
So for someone like me who I've not visited Shandong, is there another wine growing region globally that you can compare it to, so that I can sort of bring this to life in my mind?
It's a good point. I think you should have in mind a blend of the Loire Valley and Burgundy. The Loire Valley and probably more Savonière, Anjou. So with the influence of the Atlantic, a little bit of humidity, and some freshness as well, but some dry weather conditions, and Burgundy for the continental impact, for the power of the soil, and for the photosynthesis, the luminosity, the sun that you have.
Well, I love the Loire Valley and I love Burgundy, so sounds
I think it's a combination.
Okay. Well, I'm very excited to follow the wines. It's quite an exciting project. So we do have a question from someone at home, which actually was a question that I wanted to ask you as well, which is about En Primeur. So without En Primeur happening this year, how have you changed your strategy to go to market?
we should make it maybe clear for everyone that En Primeur will happen. There's no doubt that some of the major chateaux, including ourselves, are going to offer our wines to the market, having in mind, of course, the very difficult times in which we are all in. What has not happened is the traditional week, the first week of April, when the entire wine world could have come to Bordeaux and taste the wines. Nor the fashion week happened in Milano, nor the fashion week happened in Paris at the same time. But it doesn't stop the great fashion house to put their dresses and robes on the market, and it won't stop the great chateau to do the same, because some people have been fortunate enough from Bordeaux to taste the wine and to relay the information on the style of the vintage, the stylistic evolutions, and some of the qualities that have been perceived. And some people around the planet have also received samples so they could make a judgment on the wines. What I think this crisis will change in the way En Primeur has been approached is that it will probably less be of a circus with so many people coming to Bordeaux. It will probably be reinforced to some people that have the experience, that have been trained, that have the know-how to be able to approach these wines at such a young stage when they've only been shown 6 months or 9 months after the harvest. And it will reinforce the importance of being cautious when the wine is not yet finished. Obviously, the wines are going to be put on the market, and I have no doubt that the price will reflect the condition of the world. And it's clearly, I think, for those who want to build their cellars, young generations, young drinkers, it's probably a great opportunity to buy one of the most exceptional vintage in Bordeaux over the last 15, 20 years, as we discussed, at something which will be affordable prices.
Well, I was scheduled to be at En Primeur, so I was disappointed not to be able to attend this year. But of course, you make a wonderful point. It's just that particular event or activity. But of course, the wines will still be in the hands of collectors, and very luckily so. So you actually you mentioned young consumers, which was something I wanted to ask you about, which is millennials. And so I'm curious, again, overseeing such historic estates, have you or do you plan on changing your messaging to appeal to this younger generation?
Well, the first thing at Lafite and with all our portfolio is we're very proud to have a chairwoman who's only 33 years old, Saskia de Rothschild. So talking to a young audience, talking to new consumers, having the codes of these generations is very much now in our DNA. And even myself, I had to train to be very good with my computers and on digitals, because Saskia is very much, as a young lady, she's very much into that, and especially as a former journalist. So clearly you've put the point. The challenge for us and for Bordeaux in general is to access these new consumers. And what you're doing now is a great example for learning, for education, for carrying the story and the dream that Bordeaux has behind itself. Releasing the wine En Primeur in a different way by means of digital platforms and e-commerce, and providing some tools, photos and videos to explain what we do is also something that need to be approached. And maybe when we can all travel, maybe organizing tasting in California of these wines when they are young, soon to be released, could be also interesting to young audience and young consumers. And you are typically there to train them and to explain them what it is all about. So let's all see this difficult time that we've been going through as an extraordinary opportunity to rethink the engagement that Bordeaux and everyone in the planet needs to have with wine lovers.
Yes. So back to the wine in my glass or this property. It's a chateau that has its own cooperage. So I'm curious, what, in your opinion, what sort of advantage does that provide?
So we produce about 2,300 barrels every year from what we call les tonnelleries des domaines. We are the only one, I guess, in the world as one producer to be able to produce the amount of barrels. Many producers have their own coopers, but not with that level of production. Which is absolutely fundamental, is the sourcing of the oak. You cannot do that if you cannot secure from the Forêt de Tronchet, from the center of France, the best qualities of trees, and for that, because it's a very strongly regulated exercise, you need to have connections for generations. These forests are there because King Louis XIV, when he was in Versailles, planted the forest in order to build ships to fight against the British Navy. And therefore, these trees have had extraordinary history, but it's a very traditional way to approach. It's not an open market. It's all about know-how and skill. So I would say that our foremost strength is the sourcing of the oak. The second one is we've made so many mistakes over the last 50, 60 years producing these barrels that we know what we should not do. I'm not sure we know what we should do, but we know what doesn't work, and that's also is a great advantage. And having our own barrels allows us to use these barrels in all our vineyards, not only in Bordeaux but in China, in Argentina, in Chile, in Languedoc. Unfortunately, we need to buy barrels as well from the open market, from the great coopers such as Taranceau, Radou, François Frère, and many others, because we cannot supply everything. But it's giving us a great sense of attention to details, and it's all part of our DNA.
I see. So I have a question for you about sort of tasting wines in their youth and being able to sort of predict their trajectory. So at what point, if any, do you think that you're able to predict whether a wine will be received well by the critics?
I guess we put our fingers in the wind. There is a very basic, simple way. At harvest time, you know more or less what are the quality of the grapes, because you know what has been the weather patterns over the last 3 weeks. If you take, for example, let's say 2020, so far it's a dream vintage. Why? Because flowering is very homogeneous. There is a lot of reserve of water in the soil, so it could create some hydric stress. If we continue to have this kind of dry weather in July, and then if we had some heavy storm and rain by the end of July, early August, to speed up the veraison, and then we have dry weather in August with not too many warm temperature and a beautiful Indian summer in September, then we know that potentially we have a great vintage. So probably the best way to approach the quality is to look at the weather conditions at the last day of harvest. And then the rest is part of the magic, the mystery of the terroir and the craftsmanship that goes behind all these great wines.
Well, this has been very kind of you to take this time, and I know it's just the beginning of my day, but probably time for you to enjoy a glass of wine and relax. So I have just one final question for you, which is, I learned so much from you. This is just the second time we've had the pleasure of sort of speaking. The first was in person, and now virtually. And I always have such a great sense of energy and renewed enthusiasm for continuing to learn. So my question is, what is next for you? What is the next wine project or the next thing you would like to discover?
We would love to be able to produce wine in the Napa Valley in California. This is unfortunately missing in our portfolio. So if the conditions and the situation allows us to be able to jump into a project in Napa, that will probably be a dream for us. And I know Napa a little bit because in my previous life I was in charge of Chandon in Yonville and Newton in Santa Elena. So we would love to do something in Napa if at all possible. And the other place of the world where we would love to be is Italy. Saskia de Rothschild she's half Italian by her mother. And we have nothing in Tuscany, so maybe in Montalcino would be great.
Very exciting. Well, I'm sitting here in Napa currently, and I can say I would absolutely love to have you as a neighbor. So I look forward to that project and would welcome seeing you around town. So,
Thank you.
thank
You live in a beautiful part of the world where everyone is extremely kind and has a great sense of serenity, which in the world where we are today, it's something to keep and to reinforce.
Absolutely. I could not have put it better. So thank you again, Mr. Prats, for joining. It's such a distinct honor and pleasure to see you again, even just via the screen. And I look forward to seeing you again, either here or in Bordeaux or any number of your exciting projects, maybe in Shandong. And everyone who joined us from home, thank you so much for being part of the Wine Access Experience on Facebook. We're very excited to keep talking and learning about wine through this medium. So thank you again, Monsieur. Good evening, and all my best.
Keep safe. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.